this is in general an intro to blockchain event. So let's start to talk about blockchain. First, I said a few words about Encode before, but we are a university developer community. We aim to educate, support, and back university and hacker talent in blockchain. The reason we do this is, by my estimations, there are about 3,000 to 5,000 developers in blockchain. We have some good data to back this up, and there's a lot of money coming into the blockchain space. And quite frankly, it's not a good idea for the market value of developers to probably go any higher than they are now. It certainly makes it a little bit tricky for startups to kind of build good companies if the price of a developer is so high. So we need more talent in the space, and now is as a good an opportunity, in fact, the best opportunities ever to get involved in the space. So if you're a developer or if you're a non-developer, we want you in the space, and you can have a great impact. I got into the space 3 years ago. I'd only graduated in 2017 anyway, and I've had a great time. And it's certainly more fun when the markets are up, but it was jolly good fun even when the markets weren't as good as they are today. So we really want to see you do great things in the space. What do? We do hackathons, we do accelerators, we have a dedicated recruitment piece we just launched, we invest in the best guys, we educate with events like today, and we do a lot of AMAs, and we've got lots coming up. So if you want to see more about the Encode schedule, I'm sure George is going to pop in a couple of links while we're talking. So there's many things, not just this event, that you can kind of sink your teeth into with Encode. Many universities here, we should do a new slide that has all the universities, but many different universities are represented in Encode, over 75 today and growing. I think this number needs to be updated, but in general, and many of you are here today, but we're fantastically pleased to have such a diverse and brilliant student and university audience that are really the lifeblood of Encode. I want to say a few words to start off, obviously, about Concordium, who are the sponsors of today's event, but it really is to introduce Concordium to the developer world. And they're a privacy-centric, public and permissionless blockchain for businesses. We're going to disambiguate what that means, but the key things I would take home are the privacy-centric and built for businesses bits, which are a little bit different to any other platform in blockchain. We're going to talk a lot about them today, and really trying to use them as the key example with blockchain. But thank you for backing us in this event. We look forward to kind of doing a great series with you. This event series is 6 events long, 2 per kind of region. This event today, and then there's a second event in this region in 2 weeks' time about how to code in blockchain, where we will really go kind of take a deep dive and teach you the first steps to building applications and stuff in blockchain. So let's take a step back. How did Concordium come to be? And I like this story because you'll see why in a minute. But it comes first from a very inspirational man, Lars Christensen. He is a fantastic entrepreneur, very famous entrepreneur, CEO and founder of Saxo Bank. But it's kind of his brainchild, the Concordium, in part his brainchild, the Concordium idea. And what I like as well is that he is an Arsenal fan, and I am an Arsenal fan. And in fact, actually, this game is on. This event is on during an Arsenal game, so that is the level of sacrifice I'm prepared to make for Encode and Concordium. But he is an Arsenal fan, and the name Concordium, I'm told, actually comes from the Arsenal phrase that embodies the club, which is Victoria Concordia Crescit, victory through harmony. And so Concordia means Concordium. Someone says they can't hear anything. Is that the case for everyone else? Can everyone else hear me?
On my side, it's perfectly clear.
Perfect. I'm sorry, Christian. So hopefully you can get that sorted. That must be an issue on your end. Anyway, I'm an Arsenal fan. Concordium is the name, comes from Arsenal, so that makes me especially happy. And kudos to anyone who can name where this goal is from, because it makes me extremely happy. But less about Arsenal, more about blockchain. And one of the things I like about Concordium, like with everything we do at Encode that links to universities, they are university kind of powered. Aarhus, I said that terribly, I'm sure, at university, but they are full of fantastic researchers and PhDs who are helping build Concordium. And so what I like in the project is if it is university backed and has a university foundation, because blockchain, whilst we're going to try and make it simple today, at its deepest level is quite a complex thing that requires a very kind of a level of academic rigor that really universities specialize in. So they are powering in Concordium, and that's a jolly good thing. Key feature about Concordium is it's built with the Rust programming language, which is a very nice one. It's one that I know a lot of computer scientists at universities know and used, and probably is more familiar than Solidity. So it is a unique feature. I know that Concordium are doing a unique program with the Rust Foundation to kind of really be the kind of blockchain linked to the Rust Foundation, the Rust programming language of choice. So for those of you who are Rust fans, you're in very good luck today. please do. This is a good thing. So you'll learn a lot more of it over the next coming events. But I think that's certainly to Concordium's credit that they use Rust. Right, that's the kind of general introduction. If there's any questions, we will go. I know Bogdan's put one in now, but we'll come to that sort of question a little bit later. There will be some dedicated time at the end for us to ask some in-depth questions, for you to ask some in-depth questions. I'll try and answer the quick and easy ones as I'm talking right now. So I want to start at a very general level. The pitch of this event is for someone who is an intelligent outsider, has heard of Bitcoin, and we'll try and go into, for some people, a little bit of depth, for some others, some very general depth, some very low level depth. But I want to start with the simple assumption that you will have heard of Bitcoin, particularly around now in the news. The price has hit all-time high, and what I want to kind of say to you is Bitcoin is great, has many good things, but Bitcoin actually is only the tip of the iceberg for the blockchain space and what you can do with it. And its value actually is quite linked to the fact it is the poster child. But Bitcoin is what we epitomize the space on, but we're going to really kind of strip back and see where does Concordium fit in relation to this, and what is blockchain in general in relation to what Bitcoin is. This little chart I think is quite helpful in that I might just turn my Telegram off so that I don't get pinged during the event. There we go. This chart is quite illustrative. Now, a lot of you will have heard not just about the prices, but the kind of you might not be aware how valuable crypto is. I'm not saying valuable. I'm saying valuable in the most literal sense. It has the market cap of crypto assets. This is actually just Ethereum, which is one of them. But you can kind of see things are volatile in crypto, and that the reason particularly your interest is probably peaked right now is because the prices are so high. But quite frankly, if you look at the difference between the two peaks, that's where a lot of the building has happened. That's when Concordium was born. That's where most of the good products were born. So what I want to say to you is, even if the market were to crash tomorrow, there is a lot of fantastic smart people, a lot of money, a lot of kind of vigor in the space that should power it for many years to come. And this is only a very good thing. So I want to disambiguate. This is my wordiest slide, I assure you. I don't like wordy slides in general. I'll keep the slides extremely short. And by the way, the video and the slides for this will be available after the event. So I will send those. We will publish those and send those over. But in general, I want to disambiguate Bitcoin. I want to get some things very clear to start off with. And the first thing I want to say is Bitcoin is something that you will have heard of. You will have heard of something called a cryptocurrency. And what is a cryptocurrency? Okay, well, it's literally a currency that uses cryptography in some way. This is like the most basic thing. And what I want you to think about it is as a currency. We use a currency as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, a way of kind of trading thing. We use it as kind of a means to trade stuff. And what all of this, the difference in Bitcoin compared to pounds and dollars and whatever you might use, euros, rands, whatever you might want to use, is that it uses a piece of technology called blockchain. And blockchain is a way for you to cryptographically agree that something has happened without needing to trust a central party. And this is a kind of core tenet, this idea of decentralization. And we'll go into what this means, why it's important in a minute. And we're not going to deal with cryptography in this event, partly because it's beyond my payroll, but also because it's quite complicated to explain. But in general, it's a method of protecting information and communications through the use of codes. So only those for whom the information is intended can read and process it. In the most basic sense, it's just a way of making sure your information is safe and that we can transfer information safely. So this is all you need to kind of think about for now. There's many more complexities you could add to it. But now you can see that Bitcoin, this thing you will have heard of, is just kind of a currency that uses a different system for running a currency. And I want you to hold this when we go to the next slide, which is that I want you to think of how banks work. And this is really going to the kind of the lowest level of how we want to think about things. And in general, how a bank works is that we put money in banks. I send money to George, to Beni. But what's actually happening in the background? It's actually very simple. Money is a spreadsheet in the most basic sense. And this spreadsheet says, I have this amount of money, maybe I have £1,000, George has £2,000, Suhas has £3,000. And if I trade money between them, someone needs to say somewhere, keep a little tally, a little table going. If I send Suhas £1,000, that he has now £1,000 more and I have £1,000 less. And you're thinking, well, why do you need to know that? If Suhas trusts Anthony and Anthony trusts Suhas, this is fine. Well, how do, if me and Suhas might come to an arrangement and say, I'm just going to say that I sent you that money, but I'm going to keep that money. So I've got more money now, you've got more money now. How is George going to trust that this happens? And so generally you need to write it down and you need some central party to say, okay, no, I recognize Suhas sent this money. It's clear he doesn't have this money. Anthony's now got the money. and George can trust this fact if they rely on me as a central party. This is what the bank effectively does. And obviously it's done much more simple than that, because sometimes in the case of cash, you literally have the cash. But in the case of digital money, all that's happening when I send someone money is on my account, they're saying I have some bit less, and on someone else's account, they have some bit more. And this spreadsheet is shared between many, many banks. And it's also why you might think, wow, Anthony, this sounds inefficient. Yeah, it is. And that's why when you send money to America, or I don't know, from continent to continent, it usually takes a long time, because you've got to reconcile, usually by hand, all of these spreadsheets. And again, it's a system that works, but it's not necessarily very fast. And then when you think of it in this terms, and this is actually while I'll just play this quickly while this is quite a nice, just to summarize what I've just said. I found this on the YouTube, but this is a ledger. Effectively, a ledger is just another way of saying a spreadsheet. And this is an example of what I mean when I say money moves, or is updated in a table in a spreadsheet. That in this case, Carol has given some money to Bob, so Bob has five units more, and Carol has 5 minutes less. And the video goes into explaining Bitcoin in depth, which I'm not going to do. So now I want to posit the fact that blockchain is like a spreadsheet, and in the sense that it's a tally of stuff that's happened. Let's take money. It's a tally of money being traded from A to B, and that the person if I give money to Suhas, he now has £10 more, I have £10 less. But we're trying to replace the fact that you've got a bank in the middle saying this happened. And you're replacing it rather than, now here's where the kind of cool bits comes in. I might be thinking, how the hell is this possible? We'll explain this. What if you had a system whereby we could all share information that I'd sent money, and we could all agree that this has happened? How would you design such a system? Well, blockchain is effectively the system to do so. And once you accept that, if you accept it possible that there might be a system in the world, and there is because it exists, that allows me to send money and for everyone to agree that this has happened, then you could start saying, well, do I have to send money? Could I send other things? Could I send data? Could I send code? What are the kind of limits of things I can do? Can I do everything I do on a computer in this same way and not need and replace anything that needs a central party? And in the grandest sense, the answer is absolutely yes. And we're going to go into detail now. So this is the very simple idiot's guide to kind of blockchain. At least it's the bit I understand the most, and I consider myself an idiot. But the difference blockchain says is that this is a spreadsheet anyone can participate in, anyone has editor access to, and that you actually can't make big changes unless everyone agrees. And blockchain does, in a very cool way, allows you to do this. And this is what the kind of cool thing about blockchain is. This effectively you get a system that with incentives, and you might be thinking, why would someone agree to update this spreadsheet? Why should I be involved? Well, there are incentives. You have to have incentives if you want to build a system this big. We'll go into what these incentives are in a minute. But the net result is a database, which a database is just a complicated spreadsheet. A database that can hold a lot of data about lots of different people, and lots of people can participate in. And if you think about it, if you had a system where millions and millions of people are participating in it, you can start to have confidence in the result, in the actual result itself. And trust in this result because of the process it's gone. And also, if you've got 1 million people watching what's happening, it's very hard to change something. It's very hard to kind of hack it or break it. But again, we'll go into stuff in a minute. So I want to talk about incentives because I've defined a very esoteric system, and we'll look into some specifics in a minute. But when we talk about incentives in blockchain, we actually talk about tokens. And tokens basically say, here, if you participate in doing this cool stuff to build this spreadsheet, if you are happy to be a person that agrees that this has happened, which is broadly called mining, which we can go into, or I'm broadly going to be, I'm going to kind of say to the rest of the world that I've sent this money to Suhas. I usually need to get some incentive for doing so, or I usually need to pay people to verify this happens. And this is done through a token. And again, I'm kind of dumbing it all down, but effectively, you need some incentive, and this is usually paid in a token. And in Concordium's case, they have their own token. Concordium is a blockchain. This is a good time to introduce that. It is itself a blockchain. Bitcoin is kind of a blockchain, but when we talk about Bitcoin, we actually mean the token that powers the Bitcoin network. And the Bitcoin network is like one big spreadsheet that everyone participates in order to send these little things called Bitcoins. The purpose is to send Bitcoins. And in Concordium, the purpose of using it as a blockchain, for which you can do many different things, is in a way to get this token called GTU, which is the native token of Concordium, and that you need to use this in some way to do anything on Concordium. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. So now, I've spoken very esoteric terms, so let's go a little bit specifically. Why is a blockchain good? Well, it has four main features. One, it is immutable. So there's no point having a spreadsheet unless you can't change the history. Immutable means it can't be changed. So you can't change facts that after they've occurred. This is very important. Second thing, it's decentralized, which means that no central party has control over it, and therefore could think about in many walks of life that when central parties have too much power, they can abuse this power. It's very difficult to do this in blockchain. Pretty much impossible. It's trustless. I don't need to trust a central party, which means I can have faith in the technology and not have faith in people, in actors who could go wrong. And it's incentivized to participate in this. And this is, I think, what's different. And those that are mathematicians, economists, even scientists, historians who know about game theory know that if you're designing good systems, they have to be game theoretical in the sense they have to incentivize people to want to take part in them. And blockchains have this by design. So I now want to go, for those of you a bit techie, I now want to talk about blockchains as a computer, because I've defined this very loose thing. I did politics and philosophy, so you can see why I'm so wishy-washy. So let's go into some specifics. I also did economics, but dropped it. So apologies if my economics is not quite to everyone's taste. But I want to show you a very complicated graph. Well done to Matt, our designer, for designing this. It took him a few weeks, but it's quite beautiful. And this is basically what a blockchain computer is. So another way of saying a spreadsheet is to say a database. Like I said, another way to say a database is effectively a computer. Computers, all they're doing is moving data around. And broadly, this is what a blockchain computer looks like. Nodes are just people participating broadly. Consensus is agreeing that stuff has happened. Memory is whatever's happened in the past. And processor is actually, if you've got to propagate all this new information on the network, you kind of need to, you need power and computing power to do that, and also to kind of verify and store this information. So you need a processor. This is broadly, I mean, I could make this look like a spreadsheet. But this is broadly what a blockchain is. Lots of people participating, agreeing that something has happened, remembering it, and processing this information to kind of do cool stuff on the back of it. And Concordium, and we're going to, again, I want to leave the kind of nitty gritty of this, but consensus is the way, broadly, to go back on here, that I verify that, let's say that I send money to Suhas. Consensus is the way that everyone agrees that I've done this. And again, you need to be incentivized to agree that this has happened and to use computing power to do so. But consensus is the way, broadly, the way I send the message that I've sent my Suhas to everyone, and they agree, this looks right. Yes, I can see Suhas's wallet. He's got more money. I can see Anthony's, he's got less. We agree this has happened. And if enough of people agree this has happened, then we can kind of have great confidence that it has happened. And so if you have a consent, you need a consensus mechanism in blockchain. And the one that Concordium uses is actually very similar in kind of theoretical design to Bitcoin, except it has proof of stake. I don't want to go too much into proof of stake. The difference is, for some of you will have heard that Bitcoin, you have to use a lot of computing power, which is wasteful, produces a lot of kind of byproducts of kind of, that's just wasteful to use lots of energy. You're much more energy efficient ways to use proof of stake, which is rather than doing using computer power to verify stuff, you kind of literally stake something and use that as kind of your testament that something has happened or as part of the process. Again, I don't want to go into too much depth. It's quite complicated. This is where the PhDs get paid their money. But broadly, Concordium has something that looks a little bit similar to Bitcoin with some more modern features. This is not Satoshi Nakamoto. This is where he is called Satoshi Nakamoto. For those of you that don't know, that is the original Bitcoin white paper. The paper that set out the design for Bitcoin was authored by a man called Satoshi Nakamoto. He's almost certainly an anonymous person, and there is a person called Satoshi Nakamoto, who is this chap, who vehemently denies that he is the actual person. But I thought, for the sake of this slides, it might be worth having someone's face on it. Just to go into a little bit more techie stuff, and again, the slides will go around afterwards. I don't want to go into too much depth about this, but each of the nodes, let me actually move let's move you guys so that I can actually see my screen. Each of the nodes runs part of the code required to make the system function. Nodes are incentivized to behave honestly, but a well-designed consensus mechanism enforces the correct operation of the blockchain computer, even if a significant number of nodes misbehave. And this is very important because I've just defined a system that you might think, oh, what if there's a bad actor that says, I'm not verifying that happened. No, didn't happen, not doing it, I'm going to break the system. A good consensus mechanism, incentivizes people, makes it in their interest, gives them tokens to the effect that makes them want to say the right thing. And also, if a number of bad actors do behave irrationally, that you can still get the message across quite clearly and in agreement that such and such things have happened. In the case of money, money has traded hands. In the case of data, that data goes from one person to another. So this is a little bit more of consensus mechanisms. I'm just going to briefly read this out. But as I said, all a consensus mechanism does is it agrees or it aggregates votes from lots of different people about what they think of what's happened on the network. And the idea is that if you do this quickly enough, and Concordium does it quite quickly, particularly quickly, then which you want to do, you can't really do anything in blockchain until you agree that the previous things have happened. But effectively, you're aggregating lots of votes about what has happened. And just to kind of make you understand how the word blockchain comes about, the rounds of voting are called blocks, or broken into blocks, which are then chained together. So you have lots of rounds of voting of blocks into a chain, and you eventually get a blockchain as a net result. And use some maths here, but I'm not going to go into the maths. The result is a system that provides trust guarantees to anyone using it, since nothing could be computed without widespread agreement. So we'll move back of the nodes, i.e. a consensus mechanism. So we're trusting code, not people. And this is a very important thing. The techie definition of blockchain: a virtual computer that runs on top of a network of physical computers that provides strong, auditable, game theoretical guarantees that the code it runs will continue to operate as designed. Again, we've designed a system that doesn't require a central party to do cool things, and we trust the code, and we don't trust any one particular person, because code, once it's there, can't really be, usually, in the case of blockchain, can't really be changed. So this requires some trust guarantees. Again, I don't want to go too technical, but if those of you that are interested, and we'll go into the next workshop, we'll kind of go into more depth here. But this is various kind of layers of a blockchain. You've got the interface, the actual using of it. If you were to send, such as a Bitcoin or some GTUs from Concordium, you've got the smart contracts, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and then you've got the computing, verifying that all this has happened, consensus, doing the voting about what this has happened, and at the very lowest level, for those of you that are low-level programmers, maybe those Rust enthusiasts as well, there's the hardware networking. But again, beyond my payroll, so we're not going to go into that today. Any questions, guys? Please kind of send them into chat, and we'll get to them during the event, guys. So now I want to talk about smart contracts, because quite frankly, I've just, again, showed you cool things, but you might be thinking, well, I get the money case, Anthony, but I'm going to use Bitcoin or something similar than Concordium. So why do I care? So you care because of smart contracts. Now, smart contracts effectively say this. You've all used a spreadsheet, and it says you have these things called if-then statements. And if-then statements say, if such and such things happened, then do this. So if George sends me £10, give Suhas £11. Maybe that would be a very simple if-then statement. But these are just code. Spreadsheets are just code. And you can start, once you have a system that is sending data that's running completely kind of digitally, you can start using this if-then statements. And if we talk about money, and we talk about data, and you're running for a whole system that brings lots and lots of people together and does lots of cool things, we can start building kind of applications on top of this. And smart contracts are very cool, complicated ways of saying, if such and such things happen, do this. A great example is in fundraising. So I want to go back a few slides and talk about ICOs, because again, for those of you who might have heard of ICOs, this ICO boom here, this basically said this: we've got this cool thing called smart contracts. And so what we want to do is say, why don't we devise something that says, for every person in a blockchain network has an address, a wallet, basically has somewhere where they can put their money. And this is known as basically a string of letters and numbers. It basically said this: we're going to start a project, a new startup, a new company. If I want to raise money, I'm going to raise 10 million. And it's like a bit like Kickstarter, for those that know. If I raise 10 million, send everyone who sent me money some tokens relative to how much they put in. So I say, send money to this address. And once it hits 10 million, let's say George puts in $1 million, he gets 10% of the future tokens, or some equation to that effect, 10% of the tokens available. And what this was, because it's basically an if-then statement: if I hit my target, give this other thing, i.e. a token for another blockchain, another network. You've got an amazing fundraising device. And it did lead to a boom that valued crypto at almost $1 trillion, and it hasn't hit those heights for 3 years. But that's a very basic if-then statement, and you can do cooler versions of this. I know those of you that are more techie-minded, more coding-minded, will be kind of you can start to think, oh wow, yeah, if I've got this network, I can do lots of stuff, and I can kind of move money. And if money is basically just like data anyway, like money is basically, if you think about it, it's just like some random unit of account that I use to kind of trade between people that we give value to it. It doesn't have value in and of itself. Then I can start doing cool things. I want to take just a stop there before I get into the depths of smart contracts. I'm just going to check if there's any questions or anything. I might just close that so I can see. Give me a second. Okay, so the questions seem to be answered. Guys, if you do have any questions, please send them through. And I have my chat window open so I can get to those during. So let me restart that.
Just a little comment, if you don't mind, Anthony, just to make sure that we understand each other. No ICO on top of
yes,
Concordium. And that's very important to say that.
Yes, sorry. Yes, disclaimer. Concordium has done everything. ICOs, I'm perhaps legitimizing them a little bit too much as cool technology, but they were kind of grossly illegal because it was a distribution of a security. So we are not, I hasten to add, both advocating ICOs. We are merely using them as a historical example, and that you should not do ICOs on Concordium, especially illegal ones. So we move swiftly on. What smart contracts allow you to do is to change business models. And in the case of this lovely first diagram, you can think of lots of different things that are important in society: lawyers, brokers, insurance, who are basically doing tasks that broadly, could you not replace these by code? Like lawyers use contracts. Could we not replace these contracts with code contracts that execute immediately and don't require people to execute them? Could we not do insurance as code? So if, for instance, if I lose my house to a natural disaster and it is verified trustlessly, or in a way that I can trust that that this has happened, why can't I be paid out automatically? Why do I need to deal with a person who subjectively argues whether such and such thing has happened? There's a lot of things in life that happen, and there might be good reason for them to happen with kind of human involvement. But at the most basic level, could just be simple code. They're simple procedures. And please do not, for non-coders, think code is anything other than simple procedures written in the simplest possible way that could be executed on a computer, because that's it. And with smart contracts, you can start to do cool things. And of course, the original one was Ethereum. Some of you might have heard of this, but Ethereum has problems. We'll get into those. And Concordium itself has smart contracts built in. And this is important, that any kind of blockchain you want to use these days, if you want to interact with it, you basically need a smart contract, and Concordium has them built in. It's very nice. We're going to talk about the features of them in a minute. But if you want to build decentralized applications, this is how you do it. You use smart contracts. And I want to talk about now, like, the difference between computers before and computers kind of now, the blockchain computer, is that blockchain, we've said, provides trust guarantees. It's not quite scalable yet. Concordium is trying to solve this. The user experience of it, because it's early, it's not great. But again, PCs and smartphones had problems. PCs were small and cheap, but slow and expensive. Smartphones had these amazing things, but some have lacked on kind of price and performance. Blockchains have they have trust guarantees, but they're not necessarily scalable. And we'll come back to this in a moment. But I want to talk about where Concordium does things differently versus kind of other smart contract platforms, other blockchains. And the area is these kind of 4 features. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. 1 is identity. 2 is interoperability. 3, we've said it has smart contracts, that goes by definition, and 4 is compliance, which I guess it also lends to the ICA point a little bit. So, so in terms of identity, it's if this is a code-based system and it's trustless and decentralized. Another feature we didn't talk about is usually censorship resistance, and there is a kind of problem with this, is that it often gets kind of tied up with privacy and to the extent of anonymity. And there's the problem with something being anonymous is that you can't stop bad things from necessarily happening. And in systems in the real world, we don't necessarily want bad actors to be anonymous, because bad things could happen. And actually, if you think about business in a great respect, they kind of need more guarantees that the actors are good and they have a right to trade money. And yeah, all these things can happen. So what Concordium has built in is an identity layer. they identify who you are and when you're interacting with the system. So whilst you are trusting the code, you also need to trust the actors you're dealing with are good, so that you don't get situations where bad actors compromise the kind of the reputation in a more normal sense of the network. We'll kind of talk about interoperability later, but this kind of comes hand in hand with compliance, and that many blockchains have, because they don't have this identity layer, it's very hard to maintain compliance. And usually this is as simple as, for a lot of your students, they haven't seen the real world what KYC and AML is, but it's basically stopping people moving money illegally and stopping moving money based on crime. And a lot of this is because if you can't identify the person, you can't really stop them doing anything. And if you kind of have an identity layer, it makes compliance very important. And then for most businesses, standard business that might want to kind of leverage blockchain, they need this by design. And so this is kind of where Concordium kind of really stands out. I want to talk about 4 areas of disruption. I realize I've closed my chat, so let me try and get my chat back up. There we go. Oh, it's still gone. Okay, I'll get to chat in a minute. So I want to talk about 4 areas of disruption in blockchain. How are we doing for time? It is 12 past, which is good. And these areas are data, finance, ownership, and identity. This is kind of very important. On the data side, I've already said that money is kind of data, but you can start to do some really cool things when you send data. For instance, let's take healthcare. Why is it the case that the NHS or in Britain or one healthcare kind of provider owns my data? It's my data. Like if I want to move country, it's quite hard to move your data over. Why is this not a simple kind of solution? Why is it not the case that I don't have a digital, and to go to this bit, identity on the internet that isn't linked to one account that's held by Facebook or Google, that's linked to me as a person, that's linked to my passport, that would allow me to move my data from one place to another? This is kind of important. And also, I have a lot of data that I just give away for free, my internet habits, my purchase habits, that people then take this information, kind of steal it for me in some respects. Sorry, dry throat from talking too much. They kind of steal from me in some respects and sell it on. This is kind of wrong. This is bad. So if I want my data protected in a GDPR sense, in a general sense, I should own it, and you can't own it until you kind of have a digital account that lets you do everything. Concordium is kind of trying to do this, but blockchain in general. Finance is the obvious one. I just talked about money before, and I wish I'd set it up beforehand, but in general, I can send money with blockchain in seconds. I can send money to anyone around the world in practically seconds, and this is amazing. And it's better than any remittance system you could ever hope to have. And you can, if you build smart contracts on this, you can start doing things like, I don't know, rebuilding lending products, rebuilding insurance, rebuilding debt. Don't you find it remarkable that markets in the real world like turn off at 5 p.m.? Like what the hell? Like the companies haven't stopped, so why are the markets stopping? It's things like that that were products of a previous system. That why should these things not be rebuilt in a much more efficient way? Why is it that you have companies like that run exchanges, and these aren't kind of protocols that people kind of all partake in and all kind of have a right to the governance of? Like for those of you that have perhaps traded stocks, have looked at stocks, the Nasdaq, the Dow Jones, the FTSE, these are all companies. These are all, like, all of these exchanges are run by companies, which is remarkable that there is a profit-making entity at the heart of what should be a public market, and they are. And there are good reasons for this. I can see why you want to have a competitive market environment, or exchange environment. But the problem with that is that you don't have community ownership of these assets, and you don't allow people to partake in the governance of these assets, which in a blockchain, as we saw by design, it's kind of very easy to do that, because everyone is involved in the network by design, and you can kind of build things on top of this. You can build new governance models. So finance is fresh, and I know this is something Concordium are particularly looking at, is ripe for kind of innovation and etc. I've already talked about identity, but I find it remarkable in this day and age that I don't have a digital password for everything, which is just like a digital account that I can sign securely. I find that utterly kind of ridiculous, really. And the fact that my common identity is my Google account seems very strange, because I'm not sure you can all trust Google as an entity, or there might be reasons not to trust Google. So having a system that perhaps might be rebuilt based on blockchain principles of trustlessness, decentralization, but allows me to still have an identity, is very kind of important. And also ownership is another kind of important aspect of disruption for blockchain. That because in the real world, it's hard, like it's very hard for me to kind of own and move an asset, particularly we saw with data, but this applies to many things. I want to have new ways of owning things, but also, why is it not the case that I can't own fractions of things? Why can't I take a house and tokenize it and split it in 1,000 pieces? Why can't I buy real estate in Florida without buying the whole asset? I mean, this is ridiculous. Fractionalizing something should be simple. You could do it with blockchain, you could do it with a smart contract. You just lock up, you say, this smart contract, these tokens represent these assets in a legal contract, and I'm going to distribute these tokens on a blockchain according to these means. That's an amazing way to build new assets and new financial things. But it's a completely different way. This idea of having a token to own things, or on the physical piece of paper like a stock or share, completely different way to kind of go about talking about ownership, which is really bloody cool. In general, blockchain enables new digital primitives. This is what Concordium are kind of espousing, but is blockchain in general. That's digital money. I didn't quite prepare for this demo, but I have money in my browser. I can go to Chrome or Brave or Safari right now, and I have an inbuilt wallet that I can use to interact and send money and interact with applications in a way that's far quicker than loading up my credit card and going through PayPal or going through Stripe or something. It's built in by design. You have applications that were built with using these wallets in mind, in which most websites are not old. At least they're built with using the fiat system in mind, which is really slow. Fiat just means normal currencies. And that while I think what we're going to see now is, we hope, maybe it will be now, maybe a few years, but we're going to see the trustlessness enabling new digital primitives. So digital money, digital goods, smart contracts, DAOs, which we haven't talked about, but are just governance models using blockchain. And you could start to see some very cool things. I'm sure Concordium is aiming to spawn many of these. What are the problems with blockchain? And these are problems that I'm sure we'll get into later about what Concordium want to solve. But broadly, there are 4 big problems in my book. I'm going to take a drink of water while I say this. First of which is fees. What I didn't talk about is someone has to use their computing power. I did a little bit, a computer power to verify that stuff happens. And you pay them fees for doing so. And sometimes the fees are very high. In Ethereum's case, they could be high of, would you believe it, like $100. If I want to like use an app, like just use an app, costs $100 every interaction on that app, which renders things absolutely kind of useless and stupid. So fees are a problem. Scalability. So how many transactions can I do a second? It is still the case that with Let's Take Money, if I use something like Visa, it is much quicker and much cheaper to send to do, at least within a same continent, same country, to do transactions. I think if you were doing it, let's say Europe to Africa, Europe to the US, Africa to the US, it would probably be cheaper and quicker to use crypto. But actually, for a lot of basic day-to-day transactions, it probably would be quicker and cheaper to use fiat, to use the Visa system. Volatility of assets is obviously a problem. It's a solved problem for kind of moving money, because we have these things called stable coins, which are just currencies that are fixed to one value rather than having to move, because the Bitcoin price, as we saw before, the Ethereum price is very volatile. But the fact you have a public open market every day of the week makes it look sometimes like a casino, and makes it changes the fees, etc. So volatility is kind of a problem. And the last thing is adoption. So the fact we're doing this lecture today means we've still got a long way to go with teaching people about, like, we don't have lectures about intro to mobiles or intro to using a MacBook. So this is effectively the same thing for blockchain. So we're still very early, and I love teaching these things because some of the stuff in blockchain is just so bloody cool. But we are at the start of an adoption curve, and look, good on you guys for being, and girls, and anyone for being here today to kind of learn about blockchain in all of its kind of flaws and great things. I want to visualize blockchain now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up this is, oh, that's the wrong one. This is Concord. Let me find it. I want to get, so this has all been a bit, I'm talking about blockchain, I'm not showing you what a blockchain looks like. And in many respects, it's kind of hard to show you what a blockchain looks like. But can everyone see my now very dark screen with lots of stuff happening? Nod if you can see. Good. So this is Concordium's testnet. Testnet is just like the stage before you kind of go kind of big, and you kind of make things all very. It might even be the mainnet, but no, it is testnet. And what we're saying, so I want to explain what you're saying. So this is every second stuff is happening. This is like a nice visualization tool. So you've got nodes, so these people confirming transactions. Blocks, do you remember blocks are like sets of voting? There's like, when was the last one? We're not going to talk about finalization. We've got block length, we've got block time, so all this voting, every set of votes is happening every 34 seconds, I think that is. And in general, you can just see a lot of transactions happening, stuff happening, data being moved, GTUs being sent, which is bloody cool. These are actually the nodes themselves. These are the things that are verifying transactions. This is when the last time they did things. But just to give you kind of look into, because it's very difficult to visualize a whole network, this is kind of what's happening right now. And it's bloody cool, I think, when you see this sort of stuff. So yeah, and I'm sure next time we're also going to look at how you would maybe send money with, and how you literally do this yourself. How could I send money to someone else who's using blockchain? Now let me go back to my slides. We're running a little bit probably behind, but we started late, but that's okay. And I'm coming to the end of this was meant to be a kind of general overview of blockchain. And so before we kind of take questions, this is kind of to whet your appetite for future, I want to kind of sound a cautionary note. So I did politics, so I'm going to give you a political thought. Hopefully it's useful. And for those of you who don't know, this man is called Tony Blair, and he was the former British Prime Minister. And I've said a lot of cool things, and you could imagine lots of, I talked about, for instance, us owning our data, our medical data, being taken between countries. I've talked about money, like being able to send money on a system that isn't controlled by anyone, which means it's not controlled by governments. I've talked about rebuilding exchanges so that you don't need to use the Dow Jones in those markets that are kind of vaguely publicly owned and used and open all the time. And you might be thinking, this sounds great, Anthony, why hasn't this happened? And there are problems I mentioned: fees, scalability, volatility, adoption. But another problem is kind of power, and it's worth understanding what power is. And power usually means control over a system. And so Tony Blair's Labour government, this lesson always kind of sticks with me. They got into power in 1997 talking about democracy, talking about making systems more fair and more inclusive and more fundamentally democratic. And as part of this, he had a set of policies he wanted to do. And one of these policies was actually giving more control to some smaller regions in the UK, to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And the policy was basically to give them their own voting systems, to elect their own mini governments, and and to give them more kind of control. And you might be thinking, this is great. This seems like a fundamentally great idea, make things more democratic, people get to partake in and participate in the governance process, the policy be more accurate, and all of these things were broadly true. But the real purpose of the policy wasn't to be democratic or to be fundamentally good. The purpose of the policy was the fact that in all of these regions, Labour was losing power, and that what they wanted to do was to introduce mini governments so that Labour could be in power in these governments via a voting system that would specifically allow them to be part of government. And these were called proportional voting systems, if you want to go really in depth. But it basically said Labour's power was diminishing, so they couldn't get kind of strong majorities in these regions, in the kind of local authorities. So let's set up a new government system where it's a power sharing government, but at least it means Labour will be, whilst its kind of share of power was falling, would still be big enough. And the lesson here is that systems of power only change when it's usually in the interests of the people running them. And so a reason why blockchains might not be adopted, and I'm going to end with a kind of talk about Concordium here, is that people don't want to necessarily cede control to a network that is decentralized. Like the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the London Stock Exchange don't necessarily want to create public markets because then they can't profit off them, or community-owned markets. Like healthcare providers don't necessarily want you to move your data around because things could go wrong. There's many things that could happen. Like governments obviously do not want you to kind of there to be a monetary system they can't control, because like then the government and the state loses power, and there's good reasons for this. I'm not saying there's not good reasons to hold power. And what I like about Concordium is that at least they've built kind of identity and this kind of compliance in as step one, because I think it's kind of important if you're going to solve this adoption problem. And I think it will make people who have power, which is governments, which is companies, which is big business, kind of more likely to embrace the principles of blockchain It's kind of trustlessness, it's decentralization, it's kind of scalability, it's scalability in the sense it's very large, it's kind of joint network, yeah, I think this is fundamentally a good thing. Funny enough, and I think this is how all systems change, by the way, at Labour, in one of the particular regions where they gave away power, actually are now the smallest party. So it serves them right for trying to do something selfishly, and it actually ended up completely backfiring, which is probably how blockchain goes, that a big company, a big government will bring in blockchain and they won't realize how powerful the change is, and things will look very different. But this is how most systems change. That's ending on a more political note. We're going to take questions now, guys. This has been a general overview to blockchain, a general overview of Concordium. This is meant to whet your appetite. We want to go more depth next in 2 weeks' time. We have a fantastic load of code in blockchain. You'll be learning how to use Concordium, getting stuck in with Rust, building smart contracts. And again, we can't do everything in this series. It's a 2-event series per continent. So this should be just the start, again, to whet your appetite for kind of future development. But that's in 2 weeks' time. George, if you could paste the link to the next event, that'd be fantastic. And that won't be led by me, because I am not the best advocate of how to code in Concordium. We'll get in a brilliant expert to do so from the Concordium side, and we're looking forward to that. So, guys, thank you very much. I'm going to close my stop sharing my screen now. Well, I'll keep it open in case anyone wants any slides. A few little bits that I wanted to share. I've now done that. Let me go, everyone. This is the developer portal, I believe the right one. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Beni and Suhas, for Concordium. Do join our Discord if you want to continue the conversation. I think in Concordium we'll have a Discord or Slack or such and such as well. So let's get some links pasted in there. In general, if you have any questions, my email is there, and the website for Encode is there as well. I'm sure Concordium will paste some links now for you to kind of see there. So now I want to kind of take some questions, everyone. Thank you for listening to me for the last hour or so. And I'm going to go in reverse order just because I can see them. And again, I'm going to open up to Beni and Suhas as well, because I'm sure I can't answer the Concordium ones as anywhere near as well as they can. But for a real estate platform based on blockchain technology, what blockchain would you recommend? And so I don't think I should answer that. I think Beni and Suhas should answer that one, because in particularly should talk about why Concordium might be useful for that particular kind of platform. So which one of you wants to kind of take that question?
I would try my chance. History will judge me after that, if that's okay for you guys. So real estate is a big sector. So if we try, to understand what we mean by real estate, we need to understand what is the use case. If we speak about, a process of selling a property, then you can use a specific, blockchain, and you don't need, something that is too much complicated. If you speak about tokenizing, for example, tokenization of an asset, it's a total different story. Because today you have also this trend that people are now tokenizing their buildings and selling parts in tokens of their buildings to a community. So that could be also a very interesting use case to discuss when it comes to blockchain. But I guess that we are speaking about the traditional real estate thing. Using Concordium is one of the options. You have other kind of options, but using Concordium to build such of use cases that will enable sellers and buyers to know that what they are buying is true, and to know that the seller and the buyer is really who he or she claims to be, would be the ultimate use case. And if you aim to do something like that, then obviously you must use Concordium, thanks to its ID layer at the protocol level.
Awesome. Next one, this is definitely for you guys as well. How would you tokenize an asset?
I'm not a lawyer, thanks God, but in general, what you can do is today when you sell a property in specific jurisdictions, in Israel where I'm living, this is the case. You can, definitely, build a kind of company that will, a kind of SPV that will consider an asset as multiple shares. And instead of selling a piece of paper, you are selling tokens that are enabling you to have some rights on a property. This trend is very strong, especially also now in the US. And for this kind of purpose, I would say that any basic blockchain could play the role, especially Ethereum 2.0.
Awesome, excellent. So how many nodes are running Concordium running? Or how many nodes are there in the network at the moment?
At the moment, we have a little bit more than 1,020 nodes running on the network. When and this is true, you will be able to check that in the list. We are running as the Concordium Foundation 20 nodes. So we can literally say that we have 1,000 external nodes running on top of Concordium at the moment.
Awesome. Do you need KYC to use Concordium?
Yes, but not KYC the way you think KYC. You need to choose when you download our mobile app. You need to choose which identity issuer will verify you and will help you to create this identity object. So it means that you can choose in a list when we are going obviously to launch. You will be able to choose in a list of identity issuers, which are proven companies that could be close to your home, by the way. They will verify your identity by you sending a couple of things using your mobile app and the application. They will verify you, and they will return a message that will create in the Concordium mobile app an identity object that is completely encrypted using ZK proof also and bulletproof, and that will enable you obviously to use our application, but tomorrow also to be identified by other third parties that will respect this protocol. The idea for us is also to see this identity object based on a KYC process portable to any kind of platforms on the web and the mobile network, where this identity object is belonging to you and to you only. It's a self-sovereign identity object.
Awesome. ETH 2.0 or Concordium? Question mark.
Both.
Both.
Of course. Why not?
Good. And
just to illustrate what I'm saying, Concordium is using Rust. We compile Rust in a WebAssembly protocol. This WebAssembly protocol will be very much interoperable with the EWASM that Ethereum is using. And there is no bad competition if you think about that. Ethereum is good for specific things. We are good for others. And we definitely talk to each other and respect each other very much. And especially their community of developers, which is the best in town for now.
Yes. Awesome. Jake says it's like XML versus JSON. What does that mean? That's gone a bit above my head, but I'm sure.
That's a private joke between coders.
Okay.
Well done, by the way.
Is it true to say Concordium is more aimed at business users than developers and hackers?
Oh, that's maybe one of the most interesting questions. We aim to facilitate the onboarding of the business world when it comes to this technology evolution. But on the road to reach and to fulfill this mission, we have something that is greater than us, and it must pass by creating, deploying, and nurturing a smart community of developers. To do that, we have decided to embrace a vision which is based on a philosophical principle, which is called the principle of reciprocity. And instead of coming to a community of developers and saying, guys, come to us, we are the best, we are going to pay all your events, we would like, first of all, to contribute and to show goodwill. That's why we are working now hand by hand by the founders of the future Rust Lang Foundation that will enable us to express our skills within the Rust ecosystem. When what we aim to do is to create code, libraries, SDKs, and whatever it's needed from the Rust ecosystem point of view that will benefit, obviously, both of the part of the map. So this idea is going to be expressed in an initiative that we are going to launch somewhere in the beginning of March this year. It's called the DevX Initiative, and we invite you guys to come and visit us with this initiative, which will have a website, a lot of forums, and I'm certain that you will enjoy the journey very much.
Awesome. How are transaction fees calculated?
How what, sorry?
Transaction fees.
Oh, transaction fees are calculated. It's very easy on our side, fixed. No calculation. We define, that's why we are seen as a business, a friendly thing. I mean, if you think about a business, how a business can think and calculate its cost when it doesn't know at any point how much it will cost it to send a transaction, for example, on Bitcoin or Ethereum. With us and on Concordium, this is one of our greatness. We have a fixed and flat fee of transactions. So every single business will know how much you will have to pay for a public transaction, a private transaction, for 1,000 transactions, etc., etc., etc.
Very good. What else do we have? How much time does it take to upload a block in Concordium?
What do you mean by upload a block? You mean what is the block
What's the block
time?
time? Yeah, it must be block
Oh,
time.
no, it's dynamic. I mean, we want to keep it below the 10 seconds, but it's very dynamic. We have a two-layer approach when it comes to the consensus. So it means that for the finalization, I mean, the system can be faster if the conditions are met. And if the conditions are not met, it means that you have some attacks or you have some difficulties, then we can slow down the finalization process. So I would say that it's dynamic, but we will keep it below 10 seconds.
Okay, cool. I think that is most of the questions. Any other questions, guys? We've just gone over an hour or so, which is nicely done. Any other questions that anyone else wants to ask at this stage? Please speak now or forever. Well, the next event. Cool. Well, I'll start to wrap up then. Well, look, guys, it's been wonderful to have you all here and join us to this vitally important intro to blockchain event, or at least the act of doing an intro to blockchain event is vitally important. And thank you very much, Concordium, for being with us today. Looking forward to the rest of our journey together. For those of you that want to continue learning about Concordium, we will have the next event in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks today on the 16th of February, where we'll go into more technical depth of what we're going to do. Well, let's do this question before we finish. Can you give some examples of businesses that have partnered with Concordium?
So we have a big partner in China that will join us and will deploy an independent chain. It's one of the top 3 biggest companies in China that will use our technology to solve supply chain issues, but a lot more. And we are working closely with around 15, companies from the medical, sector, the identity, obviously, sector, and also the fake news, checker sector to deploy some tools. And obviously, we're working also with some fintech major partners in Europe. We are not keen, to disclose the names of those use cases because we do feel that it's way too early. We need, first of all, to address what we are doing to the developers community and to work with them as much as possible before we can, even dare speaking about a use case. That's why you will be able also to understand that we are a little bit different than the competition, I would say.
Awesome. All right, then. I think we'll call it a day there. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Beni, anything you want to say to finish up?
Let's continue the debate because I like to debate and I like to see people, defending Ethereum. So let's continue that on our channels. And again, guys, from Encode and from this community of developers, it has been a honor. And 2 weeks from now, we will meet again. So that's great news.
Thank you very much, everyone. Slides and video will go up later today. Please do follow Concordium's channels, follow our channels, and we're looking forward to helping you grow in blockchain moving forward. All right, everyone. Have a great evening wherever you are, and see you all very, very soon. Bye, guys.